Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The sun shone brightly over the grand Forrester estate, casting its golden glow on the meticulously arranged wedding venue, with fragrant floral arches and delicate white linens fluttering softly in the breeze, a perfect backdrop for what was supposed to be the happiest day in the life of Hope Logan and Liam Spencer. Yet the tension in the air was palpable, as if the universe itself knew that the day's carefully orchestrated joy teetered on the edge of chaos. Guests dressed in their finest attire chatted nervously, exchanging glances as they speculated about Hope's pallor and the way her fingers trembled around the bouquet. Steffi Forrester observing from the sidelines with a mixture of curiosity and barely contained apprehension, her mind racing through endless possibilities, from the innocent to the sinister. Unable to shake the feeling that this moment might mark a seismic shift in her own carefully plotted return to prominence at Forrester Creations, while Brooke Logan hovered nearby, radiating maternal concern but also a simmering tension beneath her composed exterior, aware that the fragile threads holding this family together were straining under the weight of unresolved secrets and simmering rivalries, and that Liam, standing at the altar in his impeccably tailored suit, radiated a mixture of elation and apprehension. Clearly torn between the excitement of committing to his longtime love and the gnawing anxiety he couldn't quite articulate, the tension finally reaching a breaking point the instant Hope, mid-vow, her eyes fluttering like a bird caught in a sudden storm, gasped softly and then collapsed, the sound echoing through the hushed crowd like a gunshot, as her bridal bouquet tumbled from her hands and scattered across the polished marble floor, petals dancing lightly in the soft wind, and gasps of shock erupted around the venue. Voices overlapping in panic and confusion, with Steffi instinctively rushing forward, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and, surprisingly, protective instinct, as Liam leapt to catch Hope's limp form, his face a storm of fear and disbelief, realizing in that instant that nothing else in the world mattered except the fragile life of the woman he had just pledged to love forever, while Brooke called for emergency services with a trembling voice that belied her usual confidence. Her eyes darting between the stricken bride and her son, whose hands shook as he held Hope's pale, trembling body. The reality of how fleeting happiness could be hitting everyone present like a physical blow, and yet amidst the chaos, subtle power plays and emotional undercurrents surged beneath the surface, as Steffi's mind catalogued every detail, the worried glance of Taylor Hayes, Hope's mentor and confidant, standing frozen with her hands clasped tightly, a flash of regret crossing her features, wondering if there was something she had missed, some sign of distress overlooked in the frantic planning and perfectionism of the past weeks, while Ridge Forrester, his stoic exterior masking an internal panic, stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the assembly with an almost predatory precision, silently assessing who might be of help, who might falter, and who might exploit this moment of vulnerability to reshape the delicate balance of power within the Forrester and Logan dynasties. Even as Dr. Taylor's medical instincts took over, her voice calm yet urgent as she knelt beside Hope to check for responsiveness, her fingers probing for a pulse as she barked instructions for someone to fetch the emergency medical kit, her heart hammering despite her composed demeanor, knowing that every second counted, while Liam, almost paralyzed by fear, whispered Hope's name over and over, his lips brushing her hair as tears glistened in his eyes, and Steffi, her breath caught in her throat, felt a complex tangle of emotions, envy, fear, admiration, and a strange surge of empathy, as she watched the woman who had long been her rival and occasional ally lie so vulnerable in Liam's arms, a stark reminder that life's certainties could crumble in an instant, even in a moment as ceremonious as a wedding. And then the sound of sirens pierced the otherwise stunned silence, paramedics arriving with brisk efficiency, their presence both a relief and a reminder of the fragility of human plans. As they carefully transferred Hope onto a stretcher, Liam refusing to release her, insisting that he would ride alongside, his hands gripping hers in a desperate attempt to anchor her to the world of the living, while Brooke and Ridge exchanged a look fraught with unspoken history and tension, silently acknowledging that whatever happened next would ripple through every corner of their intertwined families, potentially reshaping alliances and reigniting old feuds. And in the midst of this, Steffi's mind raced with strategies, considerations of leverage, and the moral dilemma of her own feelings for Liam, all while Hope, drifting in and out of consciousness, murmured indistinctly, her breath shallow, her body trembling with a vulnerability that struck everyone present to the core, the camera of the mind capturing every minute detail, the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the slight quiver of her eyelids, the color draining from her normally radiant complexion, as the ambulance doors closed, sealing the bride within a cocoon of medical urgency. Liam pressed against her, whispering promises of love and protection, while Steffi followed in the car behind, her own emotions a tumultuous storm, caught between relief and a gnawing sense of opportunity, and as the vehicle sped through the streets, the narrative tension was amplified by the interweaving of family dynamics, past betrayals, and the ever-present specter of Sheila Carter, whose unpredictable influence hovered like a shadow over every Forrester and Logan gathering, ready to exploit any crack in the armor of familial unity, while Taylor sat silently in the passenger seat beside Brooke, analyzing Hope's symptoms, discussing in hushed, urgent tones the possibilities of dehydration, fainting spells induced by stress, or perhaps a more sinister underlying condition, each theory carrying implications not just for Hope's health but for the delicate web of relationships that had brought everyone to this point. And inside the emergency room, the staff moved with coordinated precision, a whirlwind of activity as monitors beeped, for lines were inserted, and doctors conferred over charts and symptoms, Grace Buckingham taking the lead with an efficiency that both reassured and unnerved the assembled family, while Brooke and Liam hovered at Hope's side, the weight of helplessness pressing down on them, Steffi lingering slightly apart, watching, calculating, her mind both overwhelmed by genuine concern and fueled by the ever-present undercurrent of drama that defined every moment of her life. And as the minutes stretched into agonizing hours, the camera of the imagination lingered on small, telling details, the clasping of hands, the exchange of a fleeting, meaningful glance between Ridge and Taylor, the rapid, almost imperceptible flinch of a nurse at an unexpected change in vitals, and the silent prayers of distant relatives who could do nothing but wait, as every heartbeat seemed to echo in the room like a drum marking the suspense of an unwritten chapter. And just when it seemed that the tension could mount no higher, a sudden flatline on one monitor sent a collective gasp through the room, Liam collapsing onto a chair in shock, Brooke reaching out to steady him, Steffi gripping the edge of a counter, her knuckles white, Taylor barking urgent instructions as hands moved faster than the eye could follow, syringes, oxygen masks, and defibrillator paddles appearing in a choreographed dance of life and death, while Hope's own lips quivered as she fought to return to consciousness, her fingers twitching, eyes fluttering, a faint color returning to her cheeks, and in that moment, the emotional stakes for every character were laid bare, Liam's fear, Brooke's maternal desperation, Steffi's conflicted heart, Taylor's professional urgency, Ridge's protective instincts, and the invisible, menacing shadow of past antagonists whose motives could intersect with this medical emergency in unpredictable ways, creating a tension that extended beyond mere health concerns to touch the very core of identity, loyalty, and the unspoken rules of power within the intertwined worlds of the Forresters and Logans. And as Hope finally opened her eyes, weak but alive, relief surged through the room, tears spilling freely, hugs and sobs mingling. Yet even in this relief, the narrative momentum did not slacken, for questions lingered. Why had Hope fainted? Was it merely stress, or was there a hidden medical complication that might resurface, casting a long shadow over the engagement and wedding plans? And in the midst of these swirling questions, the emotional landscape was a battlefield, Steffi processing the implications for her own complicated feelings for Liam, Brooke silently vowing to protect her daughter at all costs, Liam grappling with the fragility of life and the depth of his love, Taylor navigating the dual demands of professional responsibility and personal concern, and Ridge confronting the inevitability that the past could intrude upon even the most joyous moments, threatening to undo years of careful planning and family harmony, while Hope, fragile yet resilient, became the center of a storm of emotions, obligations, and the ever-present specter of familial expectations, realizing in that heartbeat of clarity that life and love were never simple, that joy could vanish in an instant, and that the path forward would require courage, forgiveness, and an unwavering commitment to those she held most dear, a lesson echoed in every tear shed, every hand held, every whispered word of reassurance. And as the dust settled in the emergency room, the narrative threads began to intertwine once more, setting the stage for future confrontations, reconciliations, and unexpected revelations, all against the backdrop of a wedding that had promised fairy tale perfection but delivered a stark, unflinching reminder of the unpredictability of life, love, and the enduring drama that defined the intertwined lives of the Forresters and Logans, a story that would ripple outward from this single, shocking moment, touching every relationship, every ambition, every secret, and every hope in ways that no one could have anticipated, ensuring that the cancelled wedding was only the beginning of a larger, far more complex chapter in their lives, filled with suspense, emotion, and the kind of high-stakes tension that has long defined the bold and the beautiful. Already destroyed with his lies, and Liam, his voice finally breaking free, shouted that it wasn't that simple, that he hadn't meant for things to escalate, that he had been trying to protect everyone, but Steffi screamed back that he had protected no one, that he had only protected himself, that he had played God with Luna's fate and Finn's life and Hope's future, and the room erupted into layers of chaos, Ridge yelling over Brooke, Deacon pleading with Sheila, Carter trying to restore order. Finn shaking with devastation, Steffi trembling with rage, Hope feeling the ground fall away beneath her feet, as Sheila stood her ground, still holding the evidence that proved Liam Spencer's greatest betrayal wasn't infidelity or emotional manipulation, but silence, cowardice, and a selfish decision that changed the course of multiple lives. As the shouting elongated into a storm vibrating off the walls of the wedding venue, Hope swayed on her feet, feeling as though Sheila had peeled away her reality layer by layer, exposing not just Liam's latest betrayal but the truth about who he had always been, someone who didn't change, someone who masked selfishness with righteous speeches and promises he couldn't keep, and the bouquet slipped from her fingers as if her hands refused to hold on to anything connected to the illusion of this wedding, landing softly on the aisle runner while Brooke steadied her trembling daughter and whispered that they could end this ceremony, that Hope didn't need to endure another heartbreak, that she didn't need to give Liam another chance to wreck her life, but Hope couldn't answer because her entire body felt cold, hollowed out, as she remembered every moment she had defended him, every time she had told herself that he had grown, that he had evolved, that his days of living between two women were behind him, but now she could see, crystal clear, that Liam hadn't changed at all, not in the ways that mattered, and what Sheila revealed wasn't a fluke or a mistake, it was a pattern, a deeply ingrained pattern of Liam pulling the strings behind the scenes, choosing what truths to hide and what lies to let breathe, and Steffi, normally composed even in crisis, looked seconds away from either lunging at Liam or collapsing entirely, her voice sharp and shaking as she shouted that Liam had robbed Finn of the chance to help his daughter, that he had robbed Steffi of the chance to understand Luna's descent, that he had let Luna spiral alone while pretending to be the moral compass of Los Angeles, and Finn's breath grew ragged as he whispered to Steffi that this changed everything, not simply about Luna but about Liam's role in the catastrophic chain of events that could have been prevented, and the guilt pouring off Liam made it clear that he knew it too, because everything inside him unraveled at once as he stammered that he didn't mean to cause harm, that he didn't know Luna's condition would deteriorate so drastically, that he didn't believe the message was real, that he thought Luna was manipulating Finn, but Sheila cut him off with a fierce, almost maternal fury none of them expected, insisting that Liam knew exactly what he was doing, that he intercepted the message because he feared Luna's problems would drag Finn closer to Steffi again, closer to the emotional territory Liam never fully surrendered, and in that moment Steffi's eyes widened, not with fear, but with realization, because she could practically hear Liam's thought process. If Finn became involved with Luna's crisis, Finn and Steffi would have to work together, lean on each other, reconnect emotionally, and Liam, terrified of that possibility, took action to disrupt it, and the certainty of that truth made Steffi's entire body freeze, because the idea that Liam had allowed Luna's life to collapse just to maintain emotional leverage over Steffi was so monstrous she could barely process it, and she whispered, "You did this, because of me," while her voice cracked with disgust, betrayal, and unimaginable revulsion, and Liam, unable to maintain eye contact, whispered her name like a god begging for mercy, but Steffi stepped back as if he were physically toxic, her eyes burning with the kind of hatred she had never shown him before, not even during their ugliest breakups, and Hope watched this with a dawning horror, realizing that while Liam had been preparing to marry her today, a part of him was still obsessively orbiting Steffi, still calculating how to keep Finn from pulling Steffi further away, still sabotaging anything that threatened his fantasy that one day Steffi might need him again, and that realization hit Hope harder than any betrayal Sheila could have exposed, because Hope finally saw the pattern, Liam had never truly been hers, not fully, not completely. Not in the ways she had convinced herself he was, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "You were still choosing her, even while promising yourself to me," and Brooke hugged her daughter tightly, glaring at Liam with a maternal rage so fierce it nearly eclipsed Steffi's, because Liam had humiliated Hope before and yet here she was, trying to build a future with him, only to discover he had once again dragged her into his emotional labyrinth, and Deacon, who had initially tried to restrain Sheila, now stared at Liam with a mixture of disappointment and grim understanding, because Deacon knew what it was like to make terrible choices, but even he couldn't comprehend how Liam allowed an obviously unstable girl, Luna, to suffer in silence just to protect his messy emotional grip on Steffi, and Finn, shaking with grief and fury, stepped forward and demanded that Liam look at him, demanded that Liam acknowledge that this wasn't just a lie, this was negligence, cowardice. A betrayal that had cost lives, a betrayal that shattered families, and as Liam finally looked up, tears burning in his eyes, Finn said with a trembling voice that Luna might still be alive, or stable, or healthy, if Liam hadn't kept her message from reaching the one person who could have saved her, and the weight of those words broke something inside the room, broke the ceremony, broke the bonds, broke the illusion that any of them were untouched by the fallout, because suddenly the wedding arch, the flowers, the vows, the music, all felt grotesque, like decorations sitting atop a graveyard of secrets, and Sheila, still gripping the evidence, took a small step back as if preparing for the next eruption, her chest rising with the adrenaline of everything she had unleashed, but also with a grief she hadn't expected, because even Sheila, Queen of Chaos, architect of countless disasters, felt the heaviness in the air as Hope stared at Liam as if he were a stranger wearing her fiancé's face, and Steffi held Finn's arm as though she feared he might collapse under the weight of what Luna's final days could have been, and Ridge, normally the loudest voice in the room, stood silently with tears in his eyes, knowing the ripple effect of Liam's actions would haunt their families for years, and Brooke whispered that she never trusted Liam, never believed he could truly change, and Sheila, watching it all unfold, whispered one more truth, soft, defeated, but undeniable, saying that she had come here today expecting everyone to attack her, to blame her, to expel her from the room, but she never expected that for once, she would be the one telling the truth while Liam Spencer was the one tearing their families apart, as Sheila's final words lingered in the air. Like smoke after an explosion, the entire room existed in a state somewhere between disbelief and emotional paralysis, everyone trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just been exposed, and Hope, still trembling in Brooke's arms, forced herself to step out of her mother's hold and face Liam directly, her eyes red, her expression hollow, the devastation etched across her face so raw that even Ridge softened, because no one, no matter how complicated the families had become, wanted to see Hope Logan shattered like this on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and she whispered Liam's name again, but this time there was no pleading, no begging for clarity, no desperate hope for a lie to soothe the wound. Instead, her whisper was a quiet acknowledgement of something she already knew she couldn't escape. Liam had once again proven incapable of holding her heart without destroying it, and Liam, broken and shaking, tried to take a step toward her, but Carter immediately moved between them, not out of aggression but out of necessity, because Hope looked so fragile, so heartbreakingly undone, that no one trusted Liam to go near her without making it worse, and Hope lifted one trembling finger and pointed at him as she asked, barely audible, "How could you let someone suffer just to keep Steffi in your orbit?" A question so brutally candid that Liam visibly recoiled, for the truth lay exposed between each word, each feeble justification he attempted to construct in his mind. Steffi, upon hearing her name invoked as the focal point of Liam's selfishness, experienced a profound, nauseating revulsion surge through her, having spent years ensnared in Liam's emotional triangle, striving for her family, contending with Hope in cycles that repeated with cruel predictability. The realization that Liam had obstructed Luna's plea for assistance to maintain a distorted emotional connection with Steffi revealed a horrifying truth. Liam was not merely indecisive or confused, he was emotionally perilous, capable of manipulating entire families to retain control over the women he loved. Finn, now trembling with grief and disgust, whispered, "You intercepted that message from my daughter who was pleading for help, and you concealed it?" His voice faltered, prompting Steffi to instinctively grasp his arm, as the anguish emanating from him was excruciating to observe. Liam, now weeping openly, stuttered that he had not anticipated such a deterioration, believed Luna was overstating the situation, and wished to prevent Finn from being ensnared in the turmoil once more. However, Steffi interjected sharply, her tone cutting through the atmosphere like shattered glass, "It was not your decision to make.